Do people do postcards still? You get them? I was kind of think, I'm not sure I trust postcards because the letter is right there for everybody to see. I feel like my postman is reading them because they got all sorts of free time. I do think the rudest card or postcard, the rudest mail you can get is a postcard of a beautiful place that says, "Wish you were here." That is just saying, we know you're in a horrible place right now. You're at home working. Look how much fun we're having. I wish you could be enjoying yourselves as much as us, but you're not. And I don't think they really wish I was there. I'm going to be honest, I think they're being disingenuous. I don't think any of them really wish I was there because I think they would be having less fun. And I think part of the fun for them is being able to say, you're not here. That's part of their thing. They're enjoying the fact that I'm not enjoying life. I think that's very rude. When I was a kid, getting a card, one of the great things about, because anytime you got mail, it was usually cash. Do you remember that? Remember they made special envelopes or special cards that had a little cash slot in it? Amazing. Those are fantastic. That's the best kind to get. The reason I'm saying this is this, we're going through these letters of John, and one of my favorite commentaries that I was reading, there's about 6 of them that I've been reading. I'm that intelligent. I've been reading 6 books. They're about a page in each book about 2 John. But my favorite started out with really excited that this one they think is an actual letter. They're like, this is just long enough to fit on one piece of papyrus. Not papaya, that's a whole different thing. Papyrus is paper. They think this letter was an actual, and 3 John were actual, not like some of these other letters that, like the Pauline letters and stuff that were sent to churches were kind of meant to be passed around, and there was intent to teach, but they feel like these 2 were actually written, actual personal letters. One sheet. And I kind of like that idea that this was written, hey, yeah, you can share this with everyone. It's a little bit of a postcard vibe where anybody can see what's on it. But it's just one little letter, an actual letter to a person. And it starts like this. You can tell some of that because it just starts this way. This letter is from John the elder. I don't think that means the older John. There was a John the younger and John the elder. This is a letter the elder being that he has some position of authority, yes, but also that he saw this group as part of his team and that he was offering them some truth. This letter is from John the elder. I'm writing to the chosen lady and to her children, whom I love in the truth, as does everyone who knows the truth, because the truth lives in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace, which come from God the Father and from Jesus Christ, the Son of the Father, will continue to be with us who live in truth and love. That is a fantastic start to a letter. Usually I get, to whom it may concern, or hope this finds you well, and then get right down to it. I got to admit, I don't write, I think I'm going to start trying to write that. A whole little paragraph about how amazing life is and how God loves us. What a great start. There's some little truths in this just kind of introduction part, his little the start, the salutation here, the beginning. That I love the idea that he says, I'm the elder. I think there's some of it that he is kind of the older, wiser founder. I think that should speak to us. We have a responsibility to be the elders. Most of us. There's some youngers in here. But I think we have, now that we're at this place in life, we need to pass on what we have learned and be the elder. And then he says, it's written to the chosen lady. And there's a lot of different views in this. I love the view, and I think it's true, that this is an actual woman who had a church in her home. There were several of the guys I read, and of course they were men. Some men who wrote that were trying to explain away how it probably wasn't really a woman. And that just seemed kind of icky to me. Why are we working so hard? It's written to a woman. In fact, one of them said they think the woman was Mary, mother of Jesus. She was the chosen woman, and this was a church that she had in her home. And there's besides tradition, there's not a ton of evidence for that, but I do think this was a woman who had a church in her home. She was leading that church. There was a group of people, and the congregation was her children. Yes, now, John's used that terminology to talk about all of believers, all of us who are children of God, but I think in this special case, he's writing an actual letter, one piece of papaya, You're going to laugh at that eventually, even if I have to say it all the way through. Let this be a warning to you. Even if it's just one little letter, he's writing, hey, to the chosen woman, this woman who's leading this church and the children in the church. I love that idea. And then he says, I want to offer you grace. Remember that there is grace, that there's acceptance. There's acceptance whether you deserve it or not. Remember, live in grace. It's so funny that we label a lot of Christian stuff grace. And I'm not sure that we're as good at offering grace as we are at marketing grace. I love that it's right out the beginning. Hey, well, let's offer acceptance, whether someone deserves it or not. Let's give them grace. And mercy. Grace and mercy that comes from God, this compassion, this forgiveness that we have, again, especially the implication of the difference of grace and mercy. Mercy is we're given forgiveness by someone who has the power to punish us and chooses not to. Chooses to offer mercy. Chooses to not harm us. What are the characteristics of the chosen lady and her children? Grace and mercy and peace. Peace, I looked at a bunch of definitions of it trying to find something Bible-y. And I just love this, just kind of the Webster definition. Freedom from disturbance and tranquility. That as followers of Jesus, what we are offered is peace. Does that mean that everything's great? There's no conflict? No, the world around us is in turmoil. But in the middle of it, God can offer us peace. God can offer us freedom from disturbance in our soul and tranquility. This is how he starts. He hasn't even gotten into the letter. We're not even at point 1 yet. And we already get this meaty, powerful truth that this comes from God, from the Father. And he says truth and love like 9 times. It's all centered around the truth and love that from God, the Father, and Jesus, his Son. And the chosen woman, this little church, is steeped in that. Today we're talking about truth and love, kind of like we have for the last 6 weeks. So we've talked about love a lot, and I think that's important. That is the hallmark. But I want to talk about truth as well. Truth, that, again, one of the great definitions I like this, that which is true or in accordance with fact or reality. Truth is that which is in accordance, that is, which is aligned with truth, or aligned with fact or reality. I think sometimes, and a good definition, a lot of the Bible-y definitions were things that we accept to be true, that is truth, and that's part of what we do. We have faith. There are things we believe. There are things that we know because of our experience or because of what we believe about God. But we need to understand that it also is important that it is aligned with reality. That's why we talk about living out our faith. If we say we believe something, if something is truth because we believe it, it darn well better show up in reality in how we live our lives. And John is going to address that. First point is truth practice, truth and love practiced. He goes on, so he writes this great little introduction, salutation. And then he says this, how happy I was to meet some of your children and find them living according to the truth, just as the Father commanded. I'm writing to remind you, dear friends, that we should love one another. This is not a new commandment, but one we have heard from the beginning. Love means doing what God commanded us, and he has commanded us to love one another, just as you heard from the beginning. John is not subtle, right? Here's the main thing. You got to love people. It's not a new concept. It's a command. And we show God we love him when we follow his command. And oh, by the way, what does he command us to do? We're supposed to love. And by the way, you heard it from the beginning. The beginning of the letter? No, from the beginning of time, from the beginning of our interaction and our understanding and our connection with God. That's been the point. Sorry. I like that he starts out with, I was really happy. I was really happy to meet some of your kids living in accordance with the truth. I don't know about any of you. You probably have never known this about me. I brag about my kids. I'm so sorry. I apologize. That sometimes I kind of get excited. I love it. My favorite thing is when someone's like, hey, I ran into one of your kids. I got to admit, now that they're adults, I rarely have the, oh no. Right? None of my kids am I afraid, what'd they do this time? Some of the things that they did this time, even if someone else didn't like it, I'm kind of proud of, I got to admit. But it's so cool when someone says, hey, I ran into one of your kids and we had this great conversation. Do you have that? Those of you who have kids, like, oh. Barbie, do you ever experience that? Sorry, yeah. That was cheap. I apologize. Going for cheap laughs here. Right? That thing where you run into somebody and they say, yeah, I ran into your kid, they were delightful. That's what Paul's saying. He's like, hey, I was super happy. I ran into some of your children, some of your congregants, and you know what? They're gone away from home. They've moved out. They've gone on to other parts of the world, and they're still living according to the commands and the example of Jesus. And what do we think that was? I wonder what it was like. I'm so glad that I found they were arguing the correct doctrine. I'm so glad that they were fighting for truth, that they were fighting for Jesus. What do you think it was that he was super happy about? Probably that they were loving people. Probably that they were exhibiting love, living according to the truth, following the commands and example of Jesus lived. I like the idea that they're seeking truth, that they're living according to the truth. I'm going to go on a little mini rant here today, a couple of times, about truth. We need to seek truth. We need to seek truth. I'm going to talk about it in a minute, but we need to remember that it is important, not just biblical truth. Yes, absolutely. Study your Bible. Study the context. Study the languages. Look at the history. But we also need to seek what is true. How can we live in truth? How can we express the truth of Christ? How can we love people if we don't love truth around us? Especially aligning with according to the facts. If we're going to love somebody, if we're going to stand up for what is right, we have to know what's true. We need to be people who are not easily led astray. People who are willing to do the work to find out what is in accordance with fact and reality. Not just about spiritual things, but about everything. And then he goes on to say, hey, remember, this is important. In case you didn't get it in the first 9 sentences, love one another. Love one another. What is the truth? Why do we want to know the truth? So we can better love one another. This is the important point. Not new to John or to Jesus. Love has been the point from the beginning. Connection with God means we are to love others. Then obeying his commands, obeying the commands of God. Loving God means loving his people, all of the time. And we need to know what is true in the middle of that to be able to accurately and helpfully love someone. Follow his commands, the command to love each other. There was a lot of discussion in some of the stuff, and as you're studying, I hope, again, maybe this will inspire you to do a little bit of study on John, Johannine theology. That as you study it, there's a lot of discussion about the distinction between loving brothers and sisters and loving others, outsiders. That really, and it just seems like an excuse to me. There's this discussion every time he says we should love one another and love each other. They try and narrow it down, and it seems like they're trying to put into a box. We really have a commitment. What we're really commanded to do is only love those who believe the same way we are. That we would call brothers and sisters, members of our congregation, members of our faith, members of the church. And you know what? We can make that pretty narrow if we wanted to, right? At best, that argument is we're only really commanded to love people who claim to be followers of Jesus. Which is not the life, teachings, and example of Jesus, first of all. But second of all, how easy then is it to say, well, they're not really a brother and sister because they believe this thing or that thing, or they practice it in this way or that way, or they are weird or look funny, or they have drums in the band, right? We can make that narrowed down to just, you know what, really the only people we really are commanded to love are those who are exactly like me. Because I am the most lovable being in the universe. And the goal is for you to be as like me as possible so that you are lovable. That is not the point. So I would like to extend this and for us to understand we are all children and children of God. We are all in the image of God. We all have the spark of life because of God. And we need to love everyone, not just brothers and sisters. And I think a lot less effort trying to decide who's in and who's out and who's deserving of love. What is grace, mercy, and peace offered for those who are not deserving? Starting with me and working outward. Do we think God only wants to extend his love through us to people who are already in? How ridiculous is that? The people we should be extending our love the most to are those who are pushed furthest to the margins. And there's all sorts of arguments, especially if someone says they're a follower and there's something about the way they practice or believe or live that we don't like or we're uncomfortable with. Then we think, well, then the most loving thing for me to do is slap them. Verbally, emotionally, sometimes physically. No. The most loving thing to do is love someone. Offer grace, mercy, and peace. Do we really think we're more deserving of God's grace and mercy than somebody else? I gotta say this is a good message for this group because there's people here who have been followers of Christ for a long time. And pretty easy, I think, for us to be in a rut, for us to be on a track, for us to be in a system that we are comfortable with, that we like, that we've already decided all the important issues, and please know you will never change my mind. I always hate that point because our whole goal, delivering the good news, is hoping to get other people to change their mind. Especially somebody who doesn't know Jesus. We're saying, hey, I would like you to completely and fundamentally change the way you view the world and universe and yourself. And once you do, then you never have to change your mind again. You never have to learn. We are not too old to learn new tricks. So if you feel that way, then you're in the wrong congregation. I'm hoping you are all willing to learn and change, just like I am. Love that we're supposed to be offering, love that we're supposed to be following, that is from the beginning, that was commanded by God, that God always wanted to push his followers to, and they continually messed it up and added and subtracted and narrowed and was greedy with love. Greedy with acceptance, greedy with care. All the way throughout history and the history of connecting with God, of hearing from God, of interacting with God. Love is an active part of our life in our community, and we need to be people and a community that loves. With actions that are measurable, visible, and practical. If you get nothing else today, that would make me really sad because I worked hard on this. Thank you. I always like when I'm saying something that I think is pastory funny, I always look to Brent and see if he laughs, then I'm good. And Jim too. Jim gets it. But it should be measurable, visible, and practical. When we say we're loving, if the only time we're ever loving we have to explain and make excuses for and describe how no, this really is loving, then it's probably not loving. You know, the most loving thing for me to do is withhold my wealth from people. The most loving thing for me to do is chastise people constantly. And hopefully they'll feel bad enough to turn to Jesus. The most loving thing for me to do is own 20 homes I heard a recent guy on the radio was justifying his amassing of wealth, and he said that there's a difference between wealth and greed. And I'm like, yeah, you're proving greedy. I know wealthy people who are not greedy. And have proven it over and over again. I also know wealthy people who are greedy. And this guy said his excuse for owning so many homes was, it's not my home. Everything I own is, I don't own anything. It's all God's. I wanted to be like, so you're giving God all that money? How do you do that? And when did God tell you that he needed your help managing it? Loving should be measurable. Sorry, that was a weird little tangent. It just bothered me so much this week. But I will say this. We have had people in this congregation who are better off than others, and I have been stunned at how gracious and giving and generous. And I'm thankful. Our way of loving needs to be active, measurable, visible, and practical, meaning it actually helps people. It can be viewed. People can see it. Not that we're bragging about it, but it would take very little peeling off the top to see a generous, loving group. More important, not that these other things aren't important, but loving actions are most important. Preaching is not the most important thing. I hope when the aneurysm actually kicks in and I go, that was dark, sorry. For however it happens, I hope that when people look back at me being a pastor, it's not that I was the best speaker, because I'm not. I hope it's that, man, he really loved his people. And I'm working hard to learn to do that better. It's not teaching. It's not recruiting. The most important thing we're to do is not recruit people for our club. It's to love. God infused, informed, and invoked love that rings true and is clearly more than our personality or our effort, that is genuine care and affection that involves even sacrifice. I'm going to read that again because I worked hard on that one. God infused, God informed, God invoked love that rings true to people and is clearly more than just our personality or our effort, that is genuine care and affection and sacrifice that can only happen because of God. One of my favorite things, when I see someone, one of God's children, that makes me smile and happy, like John's talking about, is someone who was a jerk and who's no longer a jerk. People who softened. People who love people who were intolerant before and now are tolerant. It's amazing. So how do we do this? We seek truth. First of all, this is my rant. Ready? Buckle up. You thought that was the rant. No, it gets more ranty. Not just biblical truth. Yes, study. So please hear me and don't take this out of context. Any of you watching on YouTube. This is not me saying I don't care about biblical truth. I do. It's primary. It's important. But we also need to understand truth. Regular old true. We live in a society where fact checkers have been given a bad name. Where it seems disloyal or dishonest to fact check somebody. I'm only going to do this interview if nobody fact checks me. And again, not just one side, not just one person. I see it all the time now. Only I get to spew my opinion, and nobody is allowed to say, you know what? That's not really true. Right? Yes, I understand. And believe me, I do understand. There is methodological sophistry. There is bias. And facts, yes, can be twisted. Statistics can be misused. That you can take something that it may seem in accordance with fact and still you put your own spin. But that is a worlds away from just outright lies. Right? So yes, understand that there's bias. Understand that people are spinning it. But that doesn't mean that there isn't fact. So be aware of bias. Be conscious of it. But don't let it make us think that everything is equally true. That's the part that's getting to me these days. Well, everybody lies, so I'm just going to go with what feels good. It's kind of what that argument boils down to. We need to be better than that as Christians. We need to be better than that as followers of Jesus. To do our best to believe in and stand up for truth. And research Meaning not just reading other people's opinions on the internet until we find one that we like, but actually looking at, numbers and science and doing our best, doing with the resources that we have, where we have literally in our phone every piece of information ever since the dawn of time, be able to do some research. We need to interpret life through truth so that we can apply the words and the example of the real Jesus, and that he wants us to find truth. So don't be manipulated by marketing, by politics, by those who would have us believe that what they say is true without checking. And again, there really is, it's happening on all sides. Right? But we need to do that. And when someone says, no, here's some fact, read it, listen to it, and find out if it really is. Be cautious of anything that of facts or somebody saying something that we don't want to check because we already like it. Right? Don't let that scare us off from studying. Don't be manipulated by lies to replace loving acts and advocacy for those who need love, mercy, and justice. Don't be manipulated by people who want us to call what is good evil. If you're doing any kind of in Christian culture lately, you're going to see there's a movement to call empathy sin. Jesus was empathetic because he became one of us. That is the ultimate empathy. We are supposed to care for others. We are supposed to feel for others. We are supposed to love others. We are supposed to cry for justice and be those who are caring for the weak. And we should be suspect and skeptical of anyone calling empathy evil, care and giving as unloving, and justice for the weak as damaging to our society and culture. So let's be skeptical and be careful and not be tricked. Let's stick to the truth. Let's practice real love. Second point is truth and love protected. We need to practice truth and love, and now we need to protect it. This is what John says. He says this. I say this because many deceivers have gone out into the world. They deny that Jesus Christ came in a real body. Such a person is a deceiver and an antichrist. We've talked about this before. I love this. He's saying, look, this is why I'm writing this, because there are lots of people who want to lie to you out there, and they've spread out. There are many, many different kinds of people who are trying to lie to you. And they are liars, those who are saying that Jesus wasn't real, a real person. They are liars with anti-Jesus message, and they have a purpose, and they've moved strategically into the world. The best way to have someone be an antichrist is not to stand up and say, I hate Jesus. You're rarely going to see that, right? Even people who do don't come right out and say it. What John seems most concerned with are those who want to lead people astray or away from the real Jesus and his real command to love each other. And those who want to change the real Jesus to the idea of Jesus, to a theory of Jesus. That is easier, because when we stick to a person who was Jesus, who was here, and said the things he said, and did the miracles he did, and walked with the people he walked with, and talked with the people he talked with, and condemned the people he condemned, and loved the people he loved, that's way harder to manipulate and fit our narrative than it is, hey, Jesus is a theory, Jesus is an idea, Jesus is a philosophy. It's way easier to mold that to my purpose. If there is not a real person that was Jesus, that is Christ, that is the Christ and God's Son, then his example means less, and his teachings even less. The tactic is to say that the Jesus that you know is not really Jesus. Right? It's a philosophy, it's spirituality, it's an ideal, it's a goal. Jesus wasn't really saying we need to do all this stuff in the Sermon on the Mount. That's kind of a goal that's out there, because that's the Jesus philosophy. Or a view that you got to interpret it to mean whatever the narrative goal that the teacher wants. And usually that kind of liar, that kind of antichrist, that kind of anti-Jesus, contrary Jesus, is accompanied by the idea that I, the teacher or whoever, is the only one who really knows the truth. Don't look too deep. I know the truth. Jesus wasn't a real person. Jesus was an idea, and I'm the only one who can really interpret it to tell you how to act because of it. That Jesus wasn't practical. That's one of my favorites. Jesus, he gave us ideas, things we would shoot for, but no one didn't really expect anyone to be able to do it. Not even maybe a real body. It was just a spirit or a vision that people had. How much easier is it to manipulate someone's vision to mean what I want it to mean than it is to say, no, he walked, he talked, he did, we got to follow him. It's a real thing. Back to truth. There was a true Jesus. In order to protect the truth and the primacy of love, we must protect in our heart and our mind that Jesus was and is real. He says, watch out that you don't lose what we worked so hard. I'm sorry, I'm doing my version of that. This is how I feel like he's writing this. Don't lose what we worked so hard to achieve. We worked so hard. How can you not remember? Those of you who have ever been teachers know this. We talked about this. Be diligent so that you receive your full reward. Be aware and thoughtful. That's what it tells me. Be on guard. Be vigilant. Be on guard for teaching that is outrageous and attacking. But to be honest, that's not usually what rips someone out of the church, rips someone away, that leads someone astray. Usually it's slowly turning, manipulating the idea of Jesus, the idea of love, to something that benefits the powerful and the influential. Be especially skeptical of ideas that really fit nicely into what I already believe and what keeps me powerful, wealthy, right, and superior. If we find like, oh man, I like what this guy's teaching because it lets me stay comfortable. It lets me kind of stay and believe and keep my importance. Be wary of that. Anytime we kind of feel that, we should go, There's a Grateful Dead lyric. That's something you don't hear in church very often. It said, when life feels like easy street, there's danger at your door. When it seems simple, when things seem to be going right. So shockingly, this was Carol Gates who told me that. If any of you know Tim and Carol, shocking that they would have a Grateful Dead lyric that went along with the sermon. Anything that makes me kind of justified, I should at least go, I got to make sure about that. Anyone who wanders away from this teaching has no relationship with God, but anyone who remains in the teaching of Christ has a relationship with both the Father and the Son. This is the point, the relationship with God the Father and the Son. That is the definition of a follower of a Christian. That's the number one thing. You hear me talk about connection. I've tried to use that word more than relationship because I think sometimes relationship has been overused. And especially if you're talking to someone who's a new believer or not a believer, they don't understand, how can I have a relationship with somebody that I can't talk to? Or somebody that's not here. I think that sometimes, so when you hear, those of you who've been around a long time, when I say connection, that's what I'm talking about. That we know we have a connection with God. The teaching is an indicator, a test. This idea that we believe Jesus is real is a test of relationship for myself and others, that Jesus is real. When we look at others, if the only way we really should be able to go, are they really following Christ? Do they really follow believers? Is not by testing their Bible knowledge, but do they have a connection with God, and do they love people? In some ways it's so much simpler, but also harder to be honest with ourselves and with those around us. Rather than just, you know what, it's so much easier to decide who's in and who's out by making a list of rules and let's all just go with it, than to really get to know somebody and see if they reflect Jesus and if they love people. We have to interpret and analyze the truth of each situation and each interaction to make sure that our priorities are Jesus' priority. We protect truth and love by having real connection with God. And then it gets down to brass tacks in this postcard. If anyone comes to your meeting that does not teach the truth about Christ, don't invite that person to your home or give them any encouragement. Anyone who encourages such people becomes a partner in their evil work. ministers used to go from town to town, and the way they took care of them was you invited them home and you fed them and you took care of them. And he's saying, look, if someone comes in, not that they have some weird theology or their talk, but if they come in and their theology is based on Jesus wasn't real and you don't have to love, don't support that. Do not give aid and comfort to that. Be wary of those who want to breeze in and offer to tell you a better way that isn't the old way that believes that Jesus was real. How ridiculous is that? And you know what? The best way to love somebody is by withholding love. Don't encourage that. Be wary of those who want to show us a better way that isn't. So many church books and podcasts and radio shows and posts are out there. You'd think with all the Christians talking and all the information, we'd finally be better. Are we? Has all of that teaching, all of that stuff made us better? Are Christians more unified? Are Christians seen as the hope for their community? Are Christians viewed as the most loving and accepting people? Are Christians seen as, or are they seen as imposing their will? Are we more excited about proving that someone is going to hell, or that someone might be able to have mercy, receive mercy and justice? I think we're a pocket, guys. I think we're working hard to be the right kind of people who love God and love people. And let's not get caught up in this other part that is a fight to see if we can really prove to somebody that they're going to hell, rather than reaching out and caring for them and showing them mercy and justice. So let's use that test. Let's protect the truth and love in the church. Do we really love Jesus? Do we really believe Jesus is real? Do we really believe real love is real love? Does a better way to the way we want to live offer an increase in love and more connection with Jesus, or does it secure my own power and my own influence? Does it keep me secure? Who benefits? Like Anne read, how long, and God is saying this, talking to the leaders, those who are in power, how long will you hand down unjust decisions by favoring the wicked? Give justice to the poor and to the orphan. Uphold the rights of the oppressed and the destitute. Rescue the poor and helpless. Deliver them from the grasp of evil people. These oppressors know nothing. They are so ignorant. They wander about in darkness while the whole world is shaken to the core. Be skeptical. And if someone is teaching, if someone is telling you that Jesus is an idea, and the best way to love is to not love, don't encourage that. Don't give it a platform. Don't give them your money, your time, your vote, your care, your encouragement. We should be diligent to protect the truth and stand firm on the foundation of what God has given his priority, his real Son, and loving others. Real Jesus was a real person who, full of empathy, invaded our world to offer rescue. And then he signs off in the letter and says this, I have much more to say to you, but I don't want to do it with paper and ink. I don't want to do it through a text. I hope to visit you soon and talk with you face to face. Then our joy will be complete. Greetings from the children of your sister, chosen by God. He wants to have real friendship. I love this part. John is saying, like, you know what? I can hardly wait to be, you know what? I got so much more to say, but you know what? I'd rather just be with you. Let's talk it through. We need to have real relationship with people. Let's build real friendships. And our joy is most complete when we have real love and real relationship with people and we are loving God together. Let's make our joy complete as we hold on to what is true and we genuinely love each other. And the beauty of it is we can do that together by loving each other first. What a great way to practice. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for this truth. And thank you that we can know truth, that we can actually find truth. Help us to be diligent in that, to seek what is true and find the best way to offer mercy and justice and peace and love and grace to people. Help us to connect with you better every day. Help remind us that church isn't a religion, it's you, that you were here, you came to be with us, you showed us and told us how we should live, and help us to find better ways to follow you. Help us to be willing to change our mind as we learn better ways to love others, to follow your command, to be the most loving people. God, we love you and we thank you, and we thank you for your grace. In Jesus' name, amen. John 13, 34 and 35. So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Interesting. It's not new. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. May we be people who live lives that are clearly identified as loving of all people by our actions and support, and that reflect the truth and love of the real, loving Jesus. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week.